The metal doors of the Galactic Council chambers slid open with a soft hiss. Admiral Quan walked into the room, his boots clicking against the polished floor. The sound echoed in the huge space above him. Hundreds of seats filled the circular room, but today only the human commanders sat in the front rows. Colonel Park straightened his uniform as the Admiral approached the central platform. Around him, other officers did the same. The air felt heavy with tension. Everyone knew this meeting would change their lives. "Gentlemen," Admiral Quan began, his voice carrying clearly through the room, "we have a problem." A holographic display flickered to life above the platform. It showed a planet covered in swirling storms and jagged mountains. The world looked angry, like a beast ready to strike. "This is Vex 7, the Admiral continued. 3 months ago it belonged to us. Today it belongs to the Rakthani Empire." Colonel Park had heard the stories. Vex 7 was rich in quantum crystals, the fuel that powered faster than light travel. Without those crystals, human ships would be stuck in their home systems. The Rakthani knew this when they attacked. "The enemy has had time to prepare," Admiral Quan said. "Our intelligence reports show they have turned Vex 7 into a fortress, but it is more than that. They have made it into something else entirely." The holographic image changed. Now it showed orbital scans of the planet's surface. Strange structures dotted the landscape like metal tumors. Dark clouds swirled around them, hiding whatever lay beneath. Sergeant Kim shifted in his seat. He had been in the Demolitions Corps for 8 years. He knew what those structures meant. The Rakthani were not just defending the planet. They were changing it. "The gravity on Vex 7 is 3 times stronger than Earth," the Admiral explained. "The atmosphere is filled with acid storms that can strip skin from bone in minutes. The local wildlife has evolved to hunt in packs and can smell human blood from miles away." Lieutenant Song, sitting 2 rows behind Kim, made notes on her datapad. As the unit's reconnaissance specialist, she would need to know every detail about the planet's dangers. Her job was to keep the soldiers alive long enough to complete their mission. "The Rakthani have weaponized these natural hazards," Admiral Quan continued. "They have bred the local predators to be bigger and more aggressive. They have created new storms using weather control technology. They want us to suffer before we die." A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Everyone knew the Rakthani. Reputation for cruelty. They did not just defeat their enemies, they destroyed them slowly, savoring every moment of pain. Colonel Park stood up. "What are our orders, sir?" The Admiral's expression hardened. "You will take the 47th Human Expeditionary Force to Vex 7. You will retake the planet and secure the quantum crystal mines. You have 2,000 of our best soldiers under your command. 2,000 soldiers against an entire planet." Kim did the math in his head. It was not good math. "Sir," Colonel Park said carefully, "our intelligence suggests the Rakthani have at least 10,000 troops on Vex 7, plus whatever automated defenses they have built." "I am aware of the numbers, Colonel," Admiral Quan replied. "But we have something the Rakthani do not understand. We have human determination." The room fell silent. Everyone had heard the alien broadcasts. The Rakthani called humans a soft species. They said humans were too weak for real war because they showed mercy to their enemies. They laughed at human tactics and human weapons. "They think they know us," the Admiral said, his voice growing louder. "They think because we do not torture prisoners or destroy civilian targets, we are weak. They are about to learn how wrong they are." Kim remembered his first encounter with Rakthani forces 2 years ago. The aliens were bigger than humans, with thick armor-like skin and natural weapons, but they relied too much on brute force. They did not think creatively. That was their weakness. "The transport ships are already being loaded," Admiral Quan announced. "You depart in 6 hours. The journey to Vex 7 will take 3 days. Use that. Time to prepare your men." Lieutenant Song raised her hand. "Sir, what about civilian evacuation? Are there still human settlers on the planet?" The Admiral's face darkened. "No, Lieutenant. The Rakthani do not take prisoners." The words hit the room like a physical blow. 2 million human colonists had lived on Vex 7. Now they were gone. The mission was not just about retaking a planet anymore. It was about revenge. Colonel Park stood and faced his officers. "You heard the Admiral. We have 6 hours to get ready. Check your equipment, brief your squads, and make your peace with whatever gods you pray to. We are going into hell." As the meeting broke up, Kim found himself walking beside Lieutenant Song toward the exit. She looked worried, which was unusual for her. Song was known for staying calm under pressure. "What are you thinking?" Kim asked. "The numbers do not add up," she replied quietly. 2,000 against 10,000 on a planet designed to kill us. Either Command knows something we do not, or this is a suicide mission. Kim nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. But he also knew something else. Humans had survived worse odds before. They had crawled out of caves to build starships. They had fought wars against nature itself and won. "Maybe," he said. "But the Rakthani made one mistake." "What mistake?" Kim smiled grimly. "They think killing 2 million civilians will make us afraid. Instead, it just made us angry. And angry humans are the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." 3 hours later, Kim stood in the transport bay watching soldiers load equipment onto the ships. Plasma rifles, explosives, medical supplies, everything they would need for the fight ahead. The men worked quickly and efficiently. They knew what was waiting for them. Colonel Park appeared beside him, also watching the preparations. "Nervous, Sergeant?" "No, sir," Kim replied. "Ready?" "Good. Because once we reach Vex 7, there is no coming back until the job is done. The Rakthani have made sure of that." Kim looked at the colonel. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted. They killed our people. They think that makes them strong, but they just signed their own death warrant. Humans do not forget, and we do not forgive." Colonel Park smiled for the first time that day. "That is exactly what I wanted to hear, Sergeant. That is exactly what I wanted to hear." The transport ships launched 6 hours later, carrying 2,000 human soldiers toward a planet that had been turned into a weapon against them. None of them knew that only one would return, but all of them knew they were about to show the galaxy what happened when you pushed humans too far. The war for Vex 7 was about to begin. The alarm screamed through the transport ship as it shook violently. Sergeant Kim grabbed onto the nearest support beam as the lights flickered red around him. Through the small window, he could see Vex 7 growing larger below them. The planet looked like a bruise against the black of space. "All units prepare for orbital insertion," came the voice over the communication system. Colonel Park's voice sounded calm, but Kim could hear the tension underneath. They all knew this was the most dangerous part of any planetary assault. The plan was simple. 50 dropships would carry the 2,000 human soldiers down to the planet's surface. They would land at different points around the main Rakthani base and attack from all sides. It was a good plan on paper. Kim checked his equipment one more time. His plasma rifle was charged and ready. His demolition pack contained enough explosives to level a city block. Around him, 30 other soldiers did the same checks. Everyone moved with the practiced efficiency of trained warriors. "Entering atmosphere now," the pilot announced. The ship began to shake harder as it hit the upper layers of Vex 7's poisonous air. That was when everything went wrong. The first plasma bolt came from nowhere, a bright green beam that cut through the clouds like lightning. It struck the dropship next to Kim's transport, and the vessel exploded in a ball of fire and metal. Kim watched in horror as burning pieces of the ship fell toward the planet below. "We are under attack." Colonel Park's voice crackled over the radio. "Rakthani plasma cannons hidden in the storm clouds. All ships take evasive action." More beams of deadly light cut through the air around them. The Rakthani had been waiting. They had turned the very clouds into hiding places for their weapons. Kim's transport lurched to the left as the pilot tried to avoid another blast. "Hold on," the pilot shouted. "We are going down." Through the chaos, Kim could hear other voices on the radio. Ship after ship reported being hit. Captain Lee's battalion was gone, their 3 transports destroyed in the first few seconds. Major Cho's armored division had lost half their dropships before they even knew they were under attack. Kim's transport bucked like an angry animal as it fell through the thick clouds. The pilot was good, keeping them from spinning out of control, but Kim could see the fear in the man's eyes. They were not flying anymore. They were falling with style. The ground rushed up to meet them. Kim saw twisted metal structures and pools of bubbling acid spread across the landscape. This was not just a hostile planet. This was a carefully designed death trap. The transport hit the ground with a sound like thunder. Kim was thrown forward against his harness as the ship skidded across the rocky surface. Metal screamed against stone, and then everything went quiet, except for the hiss of escaping air. Kim was alive. That was the first thing he checked. The second thing he checked was how many of his squad had survived the crash. He counted 15 soldiers still moving. The others were either dead or too badly hurt to fight. "Radio check," Kim called out. "Anyone receiving?" Static filled his earpiece, broken by fragments of panicked voices. He caught pieces of reports from across the battlefield. "Ship down here. Casualties mounting there. Enemy forces moving to attack." "Crash sites," Lieutenant Song's voice cut through the noise. "This is Song. My recon team is down in Sector 7. We have wounded and need immediate extraction." "Negative on extraction," came another voice Kim did not recognize. "All command ships are down. Colonel Park is missing, presumed dead." Kim felt something cold settle in his stomach. If Colonel Park was dead, then the chain of command was broken. 2,000 soldiers were scattered across a hostile planet with no central leadership and no way to coordinate their attacks. He looked outside through a crack in the transport's hull. The landscape around them was worse than the briefings had described. The ground itself seemed to move, writhing with things that lived beneath the surface. The air shimmered with heat and acid vapors that would burn their lungs if they breathed. "Too much." "Sergeant Kim," one of his soldiers called out. "The ship's hull is compromised. We need to get out of here before the atmosphere gets in." Kim nodded and began organizing the evacuation. They had emergency suits that would protect them for a few hours, but after that, they would be breathing poison. Every minute counted now, as they prepared to leave the crashed transport. Kim heard something that made his blood freeze. It was a howling sound, like wind through a cave, but with an intelligence behind it. The local predators had found them. "Move fast and stay together," Kim ordered. "We need to find shelter before those things reach us." They stepped out onto the surface of Vex 7, and Kim immediately understood why the Rakthani had chosen this place for their trap. The gravity was crushing, making every step feel like walking through thick mud. The air burned his eyes even through his protective mask, and everywhere he looked, he could see signs of the changes the aliens had made. The native creatures had been bred into monsters. What might once have been wolf-like hunters were now the size of bears, with acid for saliva and claws that could cut through steel. They moved in packs of 20 or more, and Kim could see several groups already heading toward the crash sites. "Sir," Private Yoon said, pointing toward a distant ridge. "I can see movement up there. Looks like Rakthani patrol units." Kim used his binoculars to look where Yoon was pointing. Sure enough, he could see the distinctive silhouettes of enemy soldiers. They were not rushing to attack. They were taking their time, positioning themselves to cut off any escape routes. "They are not trying to kill us quickly," Kim realized. "They want to hunt us." The radio crackled again with reports from other survivors. Small groups of human soldiers were scattered across the planet, all facing the same nightmare. The Rakthani were not just fighting a battle. They were conducting a sport hunt, using human soldiers as prey. "This is Sergeant Kim to all surviving units," he broadcast. "The enemy has turned this into a hunting game. They want us afraid and running. Do not give them that satisfaction. Find defensible positions and make them pay for every meter." But even as he said the words, Kim knew the truth. They had walked into a carefully planned trap. The Rakthani had spent months preparing Vex 7 to be the perfect killing ground. Every storm, every predator, every piece of terrain had been weaponized. Against human forces, the sound of howling grew closer. Kim could see shapes moving through the acid mist. Both alien soldiers and native beasts working together to corner the scattered human survivors. "Sir?" Corporal Han asked quietly. "What are our orders?" Kim looked at the 15 soldiers under his command. They were scared but determined. They trusted him to get them through this nightmare. He would not let them down, even if it killed him. "We survive," he said simply. "Whatever it takes, we survive. And we make the Rakthani regret ever hearing the word human." The hunt was about to begin. 3 weeks had passed since the disaster at the landing zones. Sergeant Kim crouched behind a broken wall of the abandoned mining station, counting the faces around him. 47 human soldiers remained alive on the entire planet. He knew this because he had made contact with every surviving group over the past few days, 47 out of 2,000. The mining station sat on a hill overlooking a valley filled with acid pools and twisted metal. It was not much, but it was defensible. Kim had chosen it carefully after studying the terrain for days. The Rakthani would have to come uphill to reach them, and there was only one main approach. Corporal Han sat nearby, checking medical supplies with the stumps where his arms used to be. He had lost them to one of the acid-spitting creatures 2 weeks ago, but he refused to give up. He used his feet and mouth to work, helping treat the wounded with a determination that inspired everyone. "How many pain suppressors do we have left?" Kim asked. "Enough for maybe 3 more days," Han replied without looking up. "After that, the wounded will have to deal with it the hard way." Private Yoon, now 19 but looking much older, approached Kim with a worried expression. "Sergeant, the perimeter sensors are picking up movement. Lots of movement." Kim nodded. He had been expecting this. The Rakthani had been playing with them for weeks, letting small groups of survivors think they had escaped, then hunting them down one by one. But Kim had noticed a pattern in their behavior. The aliens were sadistic, but they were also predictable. Lieutenant Song emerged from the communications room, her face grim. "I managed to boost the radio signal. You need to hear this." She activated the communication device, and a voice filled with cruel amusement echoed through the mining station. It was Overlord Thax, the Rakthani commander who had been directing the hunt. "Attention, remaining humans," the alien voice said in perfect English. "You have provided us with excellent entertainment these past weeks. Your fear, your desperation, your pathetic attempts to survive have been most amusing." Kim felt his jaw tighten. Around him, the other soldiers listened with growing anger. "But all games must end," Overlord Thax continued. "I offer you a choice. Surrender now, and we will kill you quickly. Continue this foolish resistance, and we will let this planet consume you slowly. You will die screaming as the acid eats your flesh, and the native beasts tear you apart, piece by piece." The transmission ended with the sound of Rakthani laughter. Kim looked around at his soldiers. They were exhausted, wounded, and outnumbered by impossible odds. But he saw something in their eyes that the Rakthani commander had missed. He saw rage. "Well," Kim said quietly, "I guess we know where we stand." Private Yoon spat on the ground. "Let them come. I would rather die fighting than give them the satisfaction of surrender." The others nodded in agreement. These soldiers had seen their friends die horrible deaths. They had watched the Rakthani treat human suffering as entertainment. They had nothing left to lose except their dignity, and they would not give that up. Kim had spent the last 3 weeks studying his enemy. The Rakthani were strong and well-armed, but they had weaknesses. They relied too heavily on fear and intimidation. They assumed that all other species would break under pressure the same way. They did not understand that some things made humans stronger, not weaker. "Listen carefully," Kim said, gathering his soldiers around him. "I have been watching these aliens for weeks. They think they know how this ends. They expect us to panic and make mistakes. Instead, we are going to show them something they have never seen before." He spread out a map of the mining station on a broken table. "They will attack at dawn. That is their pattern. They like to watch their enemies die in the light so they can see the fear in their eyes." Kim pointed to different positions on the map. "Han, you and the wounded will be in the inner bunker. Your job is to keep anyone alive who can still fight. Yoon, take 5 men and set up in the eastern tower. Song, you and your team will be in the west." "What about you, Sergeant?" Song asked. Kim smiled grimly. "I will be in the mining tunnels, below, I have been preparing a special welcome for our guests. For the past week, Kim had been working in the abandoned mine shafts beneath the station. Using his demolition skills and salvaged materials, he had created something that would surprise the Rakthani. They thought they were hunting weak prey. They were about to learn that they had cornered a very dangerous animal. The night passed slowly. Kim could hear the sounds of the approaching enemy army through the thin walls. Thousands of Rakthani warriors were moving through the valley, accompanied by the howls and growls of their weaponized beasts. The aliens were not trying to be quiet. They wanted the humans to hear them coming. At dawn, the attack began exactly as Kim had predicted. Wave after wave of Rakthani soldiers charged up the hill toward the mining station. They expected to find terrified humans cowering in the ruins. Instead, they found prepared positions and soldiers who fought like demons. Song's sniper team picked off the first attackers with precise shots. Yoon and his men held the eastern approach, using the high ground to rain fire down on the advancing enemy. Every human soldier fought as if their life depended on it because it did. But there were too many enemies. For every Rakthani that fell, 10 more took their place. Slowly, inevitably, the alien forces pushed closer to the main building. "Sergeant Kim," Song called over the radio. "We cannot hold them much longer." "I know," Kim replied from somewhere deep in the tunnels. "Get ready to fall back to the inner bunker. And whatever happens, do not follow me down here." Kim had spent days preparing the mine shafts for this moment. He had wired every tunnel with explosives, creating a maze of death beneath the mining station. But his plan required someone to trigger the charges manually, someone who would not be coming back up. The Rakthani broke through the outer defenses, just as the sun reached its highest point. They poured into the mining station like a flood of death, expecting to find their prey cornered and helpless. Instead, they found empty rooms and open tunnel entrances leading down into darkness. "Come on then," Kim whispered to himself as he watched the enemy soldiers pour into his carefully prepared trap. "Let me show you what happens when you hunt humans for sport." His finger moved toward the detonator switch. Above him, he could hear the sound of boots on metal as hundreds of Rakthani warriors entered the tunnels. They thought they were chasing fleeing humans. They had no idea they were walking into the largest demolition charge ever assembled by a single soldier. Kim thought about his fallen comrades, about the 2 million civilians the Rakthani had murdered, about the cruel laughter of Overlord Thax. Then he smiled and pressed the button. The explosion that followed could be seen from orbit. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. Overlord Thax watched from his command ship in orbit as the mining station disappeared in a ball of fire and smoke. The blast was so powerful that it cracked the ground for miles around, creating a crater where the hill used to be. "Send word to the High Command," Thax ordered his communications officer. "The human infestation has been eliminated. Vex 7 is secure." But deep in the rubble at the edge of the crater, something moved. Sergeant Kim pushed aside a piece of twisted metal and crawled out from under the debris that had saved his life. The explosion he had triggered had thrown him clear of the blast zone at the last second, burying him under rocks and metal that hid him from enemy sensors. Kim was hurt badly. His left arm was broken, his ribs felt cracked, and blood ran down his face from a head wound. But he was alive, which was more than the Rakthani expected, and that gave him an advantage they could never understand. For 3 days, Kim lay hidden in the ruins, listening to enemy patrols search through the wreckage. The Rakthani were thorough, but they were looking for bodies, not survivors. They found the remains of his fellow soldiers and celebrated their victory. They never thought to scan the deep holes where a single human might be hiding. On the 4th day, the patrol stopped coming. Overlord Thax had declared the planet pacified and moved most of his forces to other locations. Only a skeleton crew remained to guard the quantum crystal mines and maintain the orbital defenses. That was when Kim began his real war. He started by studying the planet that had been designed to kill him. The acid storms followed predictable patterns, moving across the landscape every 6 hours. The native predators hunted at specific times, avoiding certain areas when the storms were strongest. The Rakthani had weaponized these natural cycles, but they had also created routines that could be exploited. Kim learned to move with the storms, using the acid rain as cover for his movements. The corrosive liquid that would have killed him in minutes became his shield against enemy sensors. He wrapped himself in salvaged metal plating and moved like a ghost through the poisonous weather. The first Rakthani patrol vanished on a Tuesday. 3 soldiers were found dead near the eastern mining complex, killed by what appeared to be native predators. Overlord Thax was annoyed but not concerned. Wild animals sometimes attacked his forces. The second patrol disappeared the following week. This time 5 soldiers were missing and their equipment was gone. Thax began to suspect something was wrong, but his scans showed no human life signs on the planet. The official report still claimed total victory. Kim had learned to use the planet's own weapons against its masters. He captured one of the acid-spitting creatures and trained it to follow simple commands using bits of Rakthani ration packs as rewards. The creature became his first ally, helping him hunt the patrols that ventured too far from their bases. Within a month, Kim had a small army of native predators working with him. He understood something the Rakthani had missed in their arrogance. These creatures were intelligent. They had been bred for aggression, but they still remembered how to think. And they did not like their alien masters any more than Kim did. The psychological warfare began in the second month. Kim would leave messages written in Rakthani script on the walls of their outposts. Simple phrases like, "Humans remember," and "You cannot hide forever." He never stayed long enough to be caught, but the messages had their effect. Overlord Thax grew increasingly frustrated as his troops reported ghost sightings and mysterious sounds in the night. Disciplined soldiers began jumping at shadows. Work efficiency at the mining operations dropped as guards spent more time watching the darkness than protecting the equipment. "There are no humans left on this planet," Thax declared during a video conference with his commanders. These reports are the product of weak minds and cowardly hearts. But Kim was just getting started. He had spent months learning every detail of the Rakthani operation, their guard rotations, their supply lines, their communication protocols. He memorized the layout of every base and outpost. Most importantly, he learned to think like his enemies, to predict their actions and exploit their weaknesses. The sabotage campaign began small. A damaged communication array here, a poisoned water supply there. Kim made each attack look like equipment failure or natural disaster. The Rakthani were forced to spend more resources on maintenance and security, resources they could not spare. Then Kim discovered the breeding facilities. The Rakthani had built massive complexes where they created their weaponized creatures. Thousands of the planet's native species were held in cages, being modified with alien technology to make them more deadly. It was cruel and efficient, turning Vex 7's own life forms into weapons against any who would challenge Rakthani control. Kim spent 2 weeks studying the facilities before he made his move. He released every creature in the complex, but not before he had infected their food supply with a modified virus he had created using captured Rakthani bio-warfare equipment. The virus would not kill the animals, but it would make them violently aggressive toward anything that smelled like their former captors. Within days, the Rakthani found themselves under attack by their own weapons. Creatures that had been bred to hunt humans now turned on their masters with savage fury. The aliens were forced to destroy entire facilities to contain the outbreak, losing months of work and thousands of valuable specimens. Find the human. Overlord Thax ordered his remaining commanders. "I do not care if you have to burn this entire planet to ash. Find him and bring me his head." But Kim was no longer the same soldier who had crashed on Vex 7 months earlier. He had become something else, something the Rakthani had never encountered. He was a human who had learned to thrive in hell, who had turned their greatest weapon against them. He moved through the poisonous landscape like death itself, striking without warning and vanishing before retaliation could come. His army of converted creatures grew larger each week as more of the planet's native life turned against their alien oppressors. The Rakthani had created a perfect killing ground designed to break any invasion force. Instead, they had created the perfect training ground for the most dangerous predator in the galaxy, a human with nothing left to lose and all the time in the world. to plan his revenge. Kim stood on a ridge overlooking the main Rakthani base, watching. Enemy soldiers scrambled to repair another sabotaged facility. Soon he would be ready for the final phase of his one-man war. The aliens thought they were hunters, but they were about to learn the difference between hunting and being hunted. The Mar student had become the master, and class was almost over. 2 years had passed since the failed invasion of Vex 7. In the halls of Galactic Command, the planet was marked as a complete loss. 2,000 soldiers dead. The mission failed. The quantum crystal mines still under Rakthani control. It was considered one of the worst military disasters in human history. Admiral Quan stood at the window of his office, looking out at the stars. Reports from other fronts were equally grim. The Rakthani Empire was expanding, taking system after system, while the human forces struggled to mount effective resistance. The aliens had proven their point about human weakness, and other species were beginning to question whether humanity deserved a place in galactic politics. That was when the communication came in. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Park said, rushing into the Admiral's office with a data pad in his hands. "You need to see this immediately." The message was simple but impossible. A human military beacon was broadcasting from the surface of Vex 7, requesting immediate extraction. The identification code belonged to Sergeant Kim of the 47th Expeditionary Force. "This has to be a Rakthani trick," Admiral Quan said. "We confirmed that all our forces were eliminated 2 years ago. Sir, the beacon is using current military encryption codes. The signal is definitely human, and it is definitely from Sergeant Kim." Admiral Quan stared at the datapad for a long moment. If this was real, if somehow a single soldier had survived on that nightmare planet for 2 years, then everything they thought they knew about the Vex 7 disaster was wrong. "Prepare a rescue ship," he ordered. "Small crew, minimal weapons. If this is a trap, I do not want to lose any more people than necessary." The rescue ship reached Vex 7 3 days later. Captain Song, no relation to the Lieutenant Song who had died in the invasion, approached the planet carefully. Long-range scans showed something impossible. The Rakthani orbital defenses were offline. The surface installations were dark. The planet appeared to be completely abandoned. "This makes no sense," Song told her crew. "Intelligence reports showed at least 5,000 enemy troops stationed here. Where did they all go?" The beacon was broadcasting from coordinates deep in the planet's most hostile region, near what used to be the main Rakthani command center. Song took the ship down through the poisonous atmosphere, expecting to be attacked at any moment. Instead, they found only silence. The landing site was a flat area that had been cleared of debris and marked with human military symbols. As the rescue ship touched down, a single figure emerged from behind a pile of twisted metal. He was thin and scarred, wearing a mixture of human and alien equipment, but there was no mistaking the identification tags around his neck. Sergeant Kim was alive. The debriefing took 6 hours and left everyone in the room speechless. Kim's report was detailed, methodical, and completely unbelievable. According to his account, he had not only survived on Vex 7, but had systematically destroyed the entire Rakthani occupation force. "You are telling us that you alone defeated 5,000 enemy soldiers," Admiral Quan said slowly. "Not defeated, sir," Kim replied calmly. "Eliminated. There are no Rakthani left on Vex 7. The planet is secured." Kim's evidence was overwhelming. Orbital scans confirmed the destruction of every enemy installation. The quantum crystal mines were intact but abandoned. Most shocking of all, the planet's weaponized ecosystem had somehow been turned against its creators. "How?" Admiral Quan asked. Kim's expression never changed. "I learned their weaknesses, sir. The Rakthani are strong and well-armed, but they rely too much on fear and intimidation. They assume other species will break under pressure. They do not understand that some things make humans stronger." The full story emerged over several days of questioning. Kim had spent 2 years in a campaign of psychological warfare that had driven the Rakthani forces to madness. He had turned their own biological weapons against them, corrupted their breeding programs, and systematically destroyed their ability to function as a military unit. The breaking point had come 6 months earlier, when Overlord Thax, in desperation, had ordered his remaining forces to hunt down the phantom human who was destroying his command. Kim had been ready for them. Using captured Rakthani technology and his army of converted native creatures, he had led the aliens into a final trap that eliminated their leadership and scattered their forces. The survivors had fled the planet, in terror, spreading stories throughout Rakthani space about the human who could not be killed, who turned their strengths into weaknesses and their victories into defeats. The psychological impact has been significant, Kim reported matter-of-factly. Rakthani forces in other systems are requesting transfers away from any front where they might encounter human troops. Morale in their military has dropped substantially. Admiral Quan leaned back in his chair. The implications were staggering. One human soldier had not only survived on a planet designed to kill him, but had turned it into a weapon against his enemies. More importantly, he had struck a blow against Rakthani psychology that would affect their military effectiveness across the entire galaxy. "Sergeant Kim," the Admiral said finally, "Command is prepared to offer you any assignment you want. Promotion, comfortable desk job, full retirement with honors. You have earned whatever you choose." Kim was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "I request to return to active duty, sir. Frontline assignment preferred." "Why?" Kim's eyes were cold and distant when he answered. "They need to remember what happens when you hunt humans for sport, sir. I want to make sure they never forget." Word of Kim's survival and victory spread quickly through both human and alien space. The story became legend, told and retold until it took on mythic proportions. The Rakthani Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, suddenly found its troops afraid to fight human forces. Other species began to reconsider their opinion of human military capabilities. But Kim himself remained unchanged. He accepted a new assignment on the Rakthani front lines and disappeared back into the war. Occasionally, reports would filter back about impossible victories and enemy forces found dead under mysterious circumstances. The Rakthani began to whisper about the ghost soldier, the human who walked through their nightmares. Kim's final report on the Vex 7 incident contained a single observation that redefined humanity's place in the galaxy. "They built a Deathworld to break us. Instead, they taught us that we are the thing other species should fear in the dark." The 47th Human Expeditionary Force had been destroyed, but from its ashes had risen something far more dangerous. Proof that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or numbers, but the simple refusal to accept defeat, no matter the odds. The eyed, Rakthani had wanted to make humans afraid. Instead, they had created their own worst nightmare. A human who had learned that the only thing more dangerous than a cornered animal was one that had learned to hunt back. The galaxy would never be the same.